This is a commercial for the first frozen meal made just for kids.
Where can you find what kids want? In Libbyland.
Now let me show you this. It's a commercial filmed for another kids' frozen meal, Kid Cuisine.
Kid Cuisine is definitely fun.
Libbyland kid meals are still beloved by the people that had them. They had zero competition when they came out, but for some reason, they only survived as a product for 5 years. Kid Cuisine, on the other hand, survived a battle in the frozen food section during the early 1990s for kids' attention, and it's now one of the only freezer kid meals 35 years later. So what's the difference? How did Kid Cuisine win? The answer is actually much more complicated than I could have ever imagined, so I reached out to a couple food historians.
That's good fun.
Now more?
Our love of these brands, our connection to the brands, can be as strong as our connections to our favorite books, our favorite song of the time.
And I talked to them about my theory that involves a US president, a war, a recession, and one big difference between the two commercials. Watch and listen again.
Kid Cuisine is totally tasty.
Then compare what you just saw and heard to this one.
Libbyland dinners are fun to eat.
Kid Cuisine commercials features a kid actor talking directly into the camera,
Moms, you gotta love them.
while Libbyland featured an adult voice actor narrating through a voiceover.
Taterettes, corn, and chocolate pudding, portioned and seasoned for kids.
This is a huge and important difference, but in order to understand why this difference matters and how it came about, we need to wind the clock back a few decades.
Look, TV dinners obviously started around the 50s.
Dinners, but I say Swanson TV turkey dinners are a bigger break for husbands. Now, you take me. I can be early, I can be late, I can bring pals to dinner anytime I please, and get this, my wife never panics.
My name is Jason Liebig. I'm a food and brand historian, consultant, champion enthusiast, archivist.
According to Smithsonian Magazine, the most widely accepted story of the origin for freezer meals is that in 1953, Swanson had 260 tons of frozen turkey left over after Thanksgiving. Swanson had 10 refrigerated railroad cars full of meat, and the train's refrigeration only worked when it was in motion. So the train literally had its cars full of bird carcasses traveling back and forth between Nebraska and the East Coast. That was until Gary Thomas, a Swanson salesperson, came up with the idea for the freezer dinner. Betty Cronin, a bacteriologist, helped to realize Gary's idea by figuring out how to package the food safely. The frozen dinner was a massive success.
As you get into the 60s and lots more kids television, you started to have Saturday morning cartoons in the late 60s, early 70s.
Saturday morning cartoons were a regular programming ritual that started in the 1960s and slowly phased out after the internet was born. The cartoons from the beginning of this era still have a powerful presence and are widely recognized even to this day. With contemporary media of the 60s and 70s starting to pay so much attention to kids, it was a logical conclusion for these companies to start selling to them.
My name is Dan Goodsell. I'm a collector who lives in Los Angeles, and for the past too many years, I've been a collector of kids' food. Kids' food in the 70s and even more so in the 60s and earlier was really marketed to kids in a sort of special way, I think.
I mean, look at this Libbyland set. The giant steak and vegetables, the massive branded box. Clearly, a lot of time and effort went into designing this set.
In addition to having commercials, they ran big, beautiful color ads in the Sunday comics section. And then, the packaging was there in the stores. That was impressive.
Libbylands were visual. The visuals on them were fantastic. And they did give you a chance. It literally, the box was perforated. It would pop up. The foil tray would sit back in the box after it came out of the oven.
That's why Libbyland was great. You had the image where it was you'd search for the front, you'd have a thing where you'd search for the different little hidden things.
With sort of that nice 1960s, 70s sort of vibe where you'd take the package and fold it out to a little scene, so you'd have a little scene to look at when you're eating.
From all the accounts I've read and now listened to, Libbyland was a far superior product to what we have now, so why didn't it work?
Think you know today's food prices? Try and guess the cost of this dinner. 3 pieces of batter-dipped chicken, fried crisp and golden, fluffy whipped potatoes, tender sweet vegetables, and apple cake cobbler for dessert.
Libbyland sort of showed that market could exist, but it didn't get the foothold necessary because it wasn't supplemented by adults.
No matter how much kids loved Libbyland dinners, children of the 70s just didn't have the same decision-making power in homes as they do now and in the 90s. But the meals also cost more than Swanson, probably to cover marketing and packaging costs.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm sure parents were like, oh, I can get a Swanson's TV dinner for 30% less, you know.
It's about 85 cents, and it's a Swanson fried chicken dinner. That's some value. Swanson can change your ideas about today's high food prices.
Libbyland dinners were discontinued after just around 5 years, but not before leaving a lasting mark on the kids who consumed them. Libby just happened to be a little ahead of the market. The 70s weren't necessarily the best time to target kids in advertising, but all of that was about to change.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
On January 20th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan was being sworn into the presidential office of the United States, I'm almost certain no one was thinking, this man, he's getting ready to change the kids' freezer meal market forever. But if they were, they'd be right. One of the first things Ronald Reagan did when he took office was the deregulation of advertising, and that blasted us
into the 80s, where you get, well, this sort of real mashup of the marketing of the toys and everything else. So every toy had a cartoon, every cartoon had a toy.
80s cartoons and their toys are an explosion of nostalgia for some millennials and mini Gen Xers. Shows like G.I. Joe, He-Man, and the A-Team all became cultural icons. Because of Reagan's economic plan called Reaganomics, advertisers and marketers were allowed to directly target kids for the first time in decades. These shows were basically really long commercials for their corresponding toys. Then these shows that were already basically really long commercials also had commercials for, you guessed it, their toys. There were some loose guidelines, one of them being you couldn't use animations during commercials. That's why the ads during this time were mostly just kids moving figures around the screen with voice actors.
Imagine the detail.
Another regulation from this time, which I think is pretty hilarious, was that you could only sell to kids if your shows were educational.
You really can't read, can you?
That's why shows during this era had a PSA at the end of every episode.
Never tell anyone you're home alone, and never give anyone your address.
Seriously, if you search 80s cartoons PSA, you can listen to life advice from He-Man, Roadblock from G.I. Joe, and Mr. T.
But in order to learn anything, you have to know how to read.
Apparently, these 30-second time slots qualified these half-hour episodes as something educational.
Drugs don't make your problems go away. They just create more.
You know, I think maybe with your whole sort of Reagan thing, things became opened up more and more products were sort of created for the supermarket that were just marketed for the kids.
Up to this point in the research I was doing, I was really starting to understand why Kid Cuisine was taking a much more direct approach with their target consumer, which was children.
Because when she gets busy, I get Kid Cuisine.
But I still didn't understand what made it possible for the meals to have staying power in the market of the early 90s versus the market of the 70s. But the difference lies here, where the kid talks about how busy his mom is.
My mom's one busy lady.
The kids did start making more food decisions, I think, at that point.
In the 1970s, kids were given very few, if any, decision-making powers inside of the house. But all of this started to change as more women not only joined the workforce in the 80s, but they also started pursuing careers, which was a huge shift from the 70s.
It really set the stage for products like this to really blow up, you know, and you saw it across, you know, Lunchables came out, I think, 89 or 90, you know, and so you started to see more and more products that were just, let's give kids agency, let's feed kids so the mom doesn't even have to worry about it, you know, drink boxes.
You know, if a parent is out there working and the kid says, this is what I want to make me happy, the parent is going to do that, I think, a little more at that time period.
Starting in the 70s, really taking hold in the 80s, it was the, you know, where the husband and wife were both going to the office. They're going to work, right? So you had a lot of latchkey kids, a lot more than you might have ever had. Also, you had more divorces as well.
Even though it seems like Kid Cuisine had the market figured out down to a science, when it was released, it didn't have much of a budget or really any hopes of being a stable product for the ConAgra food brand in 1989. The success of the product came as a total surprise to the company. It seems obvious now, but that's only because we're looking backwards through the lens of time. The success of Kid Cuisine prompted Tyson to enter the kid food space with their own meal called the Looney Tunes meal.
Lisa, and these other guys too.
New Looney Tunes meals from Tyson.
I'm sure you noticed they didn't have a kid selling the meal. Tyson tried having a beloved and well-established, easily recognizable cartoon character instead. This was certainly a different approach and one that wouldn't have been possible pre-Reaganomics.
Ronald Reagan for president. Let's make America great again.
The stage was set in the early 90s for an epic battle between kids' freezer meals. Which one was going to win? Tyson with its Looney Tunes, Kid Cuisine with Penguin and the Chef, or later, Fun Feast? Unfortunately, we would never get a chance to see which marketing plan would have worked.
Kuwait, a member of the Arab League, and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait.
The Persian Gulf War was the cause of a brief recession in the United States. Tyson discontinued their meals for unknown causes, but Jason speculated this had to do with their mascots. Kid Cuisine had their own, while Tyson relied on an outside source for theirs.
So in times, in the early 90s, there was a mini recession or whatever, so it's like, so yes, products get phased out because of that, brands like, why are we paying for, Daffy Duck, and Bugs Bunny when we're like, parents don't want to pay for that. They want to get the best value they can.
The last remaining competitor in the market was Swanson's Fun Feast. Both meals were almost identical. They were terrible for kids. They had 4 compartments. They always came with a dessert, and they had original mascots.
Kid Cuisine presents BJ and the Chef in Mega Meal Posse to the rescue! BJ and the Chef!
So I'm not sure why Swanson eventually discontinued their product, but I do have a theory. Kid Cuisine didn't have a huge budget for marketing, so they competed on price. They marketed with coupons, and during times of economic struggles, working parents, mostly moms, they still felt like they wanted to do better than their previous generation by giving their kids more voice in the home.
That's made just for me.
But they also had to save money. It felt actionable and empowering to let the kids choose a meal that you also had a coupon for. The kids got to make a decision, and mom felt like she was helping the family survive the mini recession.
And so I think your point about the couponing and the always fighting with the price of the Kid Cuisine makes a lot of sense. And so there was this hole in this market. There was a hole in the market that was viable. Then you had 2 products, 3 products come in, they battled it out, and Kid Cuisine wins by maybe just, fighting the price until the others said, okay, we're just going to move into these other directions and let you reign on your own.
I had the question about Kid Cuisine winning because I had these meals that were nostalgic to me, and I've been being more nostalgic lately. But these meals, they were terrible, but I remember them, and I realized that the Kid Cuisine brand was the only one that was still surviving. So I asked the internet the question, why did Kid Cuisine win? And I started going deeper, and there's so much. It's so crazy. So special thanks to Dan and Jason for talking to me. They're super great. There are links to them and their work in the description below, as well as all the sources for my research. And this was fun. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't, if you want to support my work, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you so much. You're awesome.